Have you ever felt that sudden shift? The silence where there used to be warmth, the distance where there used to be effort, and no matter what you do, she just seems gone. It's unsettling, isn't it? Like you're slowly losing something you never fully understood. Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe and like this video, because what I'm about to reveal might completely change how you see her behavior, and more importantly, how you respond to it. Listen carefully. When a woman distances herself and starts ignoring you, your instincts will betray you. You'll want to text more, explain yourself, fix things, chase clarity. But what if I told you that every extra message, every attempt to win her back, is actually pushing her further away? This is where most men lose control, not because they're weak, but because they misunderstand what distance really means. Her silence is not always confusion. It's often a decision, and that's painful to accept, because it forces you to face something deeper. You are no longer her emotional priority. Now, don't rush to panic, because distance doesn't always mean she's done. But it does mean something has shifted inside her, emotionally, psychologically, sometimes even subconsciously. Women don't just wake up and detach overnight. It builds slowly. A feeling of disconnection, unmet emotional needs, loss of intrigue, or sometimes the simple realization that something no longer excites her the way it used to. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. When she pulls away, she's watching you more than ever. Not your words, but your reaction. She's observing. Does he panic? Does he lose himself? Does he become needy? Or does he stay grounded, calm, and in control of his emotions? Because your reaction tells her everything she needs to know about your value. Men think attraction is built through effort, but attraction is revealed through emotional stability. The moment you start chasing her energy, you lose your center. And once you lose that, she feels it instantly. You see, women are deeply intuitive. They don't just hear what you say, they feel who you become when things aren't going your way. So when she distances herself, it's not just a test of your patience, it's a test of your identity. When she starts pulling away, your first instinct might be to analyze every message, every memory, every interaction, trying to find the exact moment things changed. That mental loop can feel productive, but in reality, it keeps you stuck in a reactive state instead of a grounded one. And the more you search for answers outside of yourself, the more you lose control of what actually matters. Your internal stability. Here's something most men never hear clearly enough. Distance creates contrast. When she steps back, she is no longer experiencing your presence the same way. The absence gives her space to feel what your presence meant. If that presence was filled with pressure, expectation, or emotional dependence, the contrast becomes even more noticeable. But if your presence was calm, engaging, and self-assured, the absence creates curiosity instead of relief. This is why chasing her rarely works. Because chasing removes contrast. It replaces mystery with predictability and pressure. And psychologically, pressure is not attractive. It triggers withdrawal. Now pay attention to this subtle but powerful shift. When a woman ignores you, she is not always trying to punish you. Often she is regulating her own emotions. She may be overwhelmed, uncertain, or even conflicted. But regardless of her internal state, her external behavior creates a gap between you and her. And that gap must be handled with composure, not urgency. Urgency signals need, composure signals strength. Think about it this way. If a man responds to silence with anxiety, repeated texts, or emotional over-explaining, he is communicating that his state depends on her response. And the moment she senses that dependency, her attraction decreases. Not because she is cruel, but because attraction requires a sense of independence and stability. Women are drawn to men who remain anchored when circumstances shift. A man who can experience distance without collapsing into emotional chaos sends a silent message. I am not controlled by external validation. That message is far more powerful than anything you could say directly. So instead of trying to force reconnection, your first adjustment is internal. You stop measuring your worth based on her responsiveness. You stop interpreting silence as rejection and start recognizing it as information. Because in many cases, her distance is not just about you, it's about how she feels within herself. And when a woman feels unsure internally, she often withdraws externally. Your role is not to chase that withdrawal. Your role is to remain steady enough that if she chooses to return, she encounters a man who has not abandoned himself in the process. At this point, you need to understand a deeper psychological reality. Silence creates space for interpretation, and when there is no clear communication, the mind naturally fills the gap with assumptions. That means while you are overthinking her absence, she may also be forming conclusions about your behavior, your reactions, and your emotional control. This is why your next move is not about doing more, it's about doing less, but with intention. When she distances herself, many men make the mistake of trying to rebuild attraction through constant engagement. They send long messages, they check in repeatedly, they try to remind her of the connection. But attraction doesn't grow in an environment that feels crowded or pressured. It grows in space, where emotions can breathe and reset. Now here's the psychological shift you must make. Stop seeing her distance as something you need to fix immediately. Instead, recognize it as a moment where dynamics are being recalibrated. If you rush to fill the gap, you remove the natural process that allows attraction to re-emerge on its own. There is also something else happening beneath the surface. When a woman pulls away, she is often assessing her emotional response to your absence. Not just whether she misses you, but how she feels when you are not actively present in her life. That emotional contrast plays a major role in whether attraction deepens or fades. If you continue to reach out without receiving engagement, you unintentionally create imbalance. One-sided effort always weakens perceived value. Not because effort itself is bad, but because mutuality is what sustains interest. When effort is not reciprocated, the dynamic becomes asymmetrical, and asymmetry reduces attraction. So instead of trying to win her back through persistence, you shift your focus to maintaining your own direction. You stay active in your life. You invest your energy into things that build your confidence, your purpose, and your identity. Because from a psychological standpoint, a man who continues to grow while maintaining emotional restraint becomes far more compelling than one who waits in emotional limbo. This is not about pretending not to care. It's about demonstrating that your emotional state is not dependent on someone else's availability. That distinction is critical, because when she eventually looks back at you, consciously or unconsciously, she is not just asking, "Is he still there?" She is asking, "Did he lose himself while I stepped away?" And your answer to that question is shown through your behavior, not your words. One of the most overlooked truths in situations like this is that absence doesn't just create distance, it also creates clarity. When she steps back, both of you are removed from the daily emotional momentum that may have been carrying the connection. And in that stillness, people begin to notice things they previously ignored. This is why your behavior during this phase matters far more than you realize. Because you are no longer being evaluated in moments of excitement, you are being evaluated in moments of uncertainty. If you react with frustration, pressure, or repeated attempts to force communication, you unintentionally reveal a lack of emotional control. And emotional control is one of the strongest indicators of long-term compatibility from a psychological perspective. Now consider this. When a woman distances herself, she is often seeking a sense of emotional recalibration. She may not fully understand her own feelings at that moment, but she is responding to something internally that requires space. If that space is respected, it allows her to process without added pressure. If that space is disrupted, it can reinforce her desire to withdraw further. This is where restraint becomes powerful. Restraint is not inaction out of fear, it is deliberate control of your responses. It communicates that you are capable of handling uncertainty without losing your composure. And that alone sets you apart from the majority of men who react impulsively in emotionally charged situations. At the same time, this phase is an opportunity for you to reset your own internal standards. Ask yourself honestly, were you showing up as your most grounded, focused version of yourself before she pulled away? Or had you gradually started adjusting your behavior based on her responses? Because when you begin to orbit around someone else's emotional state, you slowly lose your own direction. And the moment you lose that direction, attraction begins to weaken. Recentering yourself is not about ignoring her or suppressing your interest. It's about returning to a state where your life has structure, meaning, and forward movement independent of her presence. Ironically, this is often when shifts begin to happen. When you stop trying to close the distance at all costs, and instead focus on maintaining your own balance, you create a different kind of energy, one that is stable, self-directed, and unaffected by temporary silence. And that kind of energy doesn't chase, it stands firm. At this stage, it's important to understand the difference between reacting to her behavior and responding with intention. Reaction is emotional and immediate. Response is measured and aligned with your long-term position. Most men react, and in doing so, they give away their leverage without realizing it. When a woman is distant, your mind may try to interpret every possible meaning behind her silence. But the truth is, you don't need to solve her psychology in real time. What you need to do is avoid behaviors that reduce your perceived value while you wait for clarity. One of the most powerful things you can do during this phase is to stop over-communicating. Over-communication often comes from a place of anxiety, not connection. It creates a sense of imbalance where one person is investing significantly more emotional energy than the other. And imbalance, over time, weakens attraction. Instead, your communication, if any, is calm, neutral, and non-reactive. No chasing tone, no emotional escalation, no attempts to explain yourself repeatedly, because explanation without request often signals insecurity rather than confidence. Now, here's something subtle but critical. When you pull back your reactive energy, you change the emotional dynamic. Not by trying to control her, but by regaining control over yourself. That internal shift is what allows your presence to feel different again if interaction resumes. Women are sensitive to shifts in energy. When a man who was once reactive becomes composed and self-contained, it creates curiosity. Not because you are performing differently, but because you are no longer easily predictable in the same emotional patterns. Predictability, especially when paired with neediness, reduces independence. Composed independence, on the other hand, restores it. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached from your own emotions. It means you regulate them instead of broadcasting them in a way that creates pressure in the connection. Also, understand this clearly. Her distance does not define your identity. It only reflects the current state of the connection. If she is unsure, that uncertainty belongs to her internal world, not your sense of worth. Your responsibility is to maintain your standards regardless of her behavior. That includes how you allow yourself to be treated, how you invest your time, and how you prioritize your emotional energy. Because when a man starts lowering his standards in response to distance, he unintentionally communicates that access to him is flexible, and that weakens his position. Staying grounded, consistent, and self-respecting during silence is not about winning a game. It's about preserving the version of yourself that actually attracts the kind of connection you want. Now let's bring everything together in a way that gives you a clear psychological framework you can actually live by. When a woman distances herself and ignores you, your power is not in trying to pull her back. Your power is in how well you hold yourself together while she is gone from your immediate emotional space. At this point, your mindset must shift from, "How do I get her back?" to, "Am I showing up as a man who remains solid regardless of her presence?" Because that question alone will guide your actions far more effectively than any impulsive reaction ever could. If she returns, she should return to a man who is consistent, composed, and emotionally self-sufficient. Not someone who paused his life, reduced his standards, or waited in uncertainty. And if she does not return, you still remain in a stronger position because you did not compromise your identity in the process. This is where many men misunderstand the outcome. They believe the goal is always to restore the connection at any cost. But a healthy psychological approach recognizes that not all distance is meant to be reversed. Sometimes it reveals incompatibility. Sometimes it exposes misalignment. And sometimes it simply shows that timing or emotional readiness was not aligned on both sides. Your job is not to force alignment. Your job is to remain aligned with yourself. When you stop chasing and start observing, you begin to see patterns more clearly. You recognize whether her interest was genuine, whether her engagement was consistent, and whether her behavior matched her words over time. That clarity is far more valuable than temporary reassurance. Also, understand this final principle. Attraction is not sustained by pursuit alone. It is sustained by a balance of presence, space, and mutual investment. When that balance is disrupted, the healthiest response is not to overcompensate, but to stabilize yourself and allow natural dynamics to reveal what is real. If she comes back into your life, you evaluate her behavior, not just her words. You look for consistency, effort, and genuine engagement, and you decide from a place of strength, not emotional scarcity. And if she does not, you move forward without resentment, without confusion, and without losing confidence in your own value. Because at the end of the day, the most attractive position you can hold is not the man who reacts to every shift, but the man who remains centered, whether someone stays or walks away. That level of composure is what separates emotional dependence from true self-respect. And that is where real attraction and real peace begin.